When was the last time you told yourself, I will start when I'm ready? Not because you didn't care about what you were doing, but because you didn't feel quite ready enough to begin. Growing up, I dreaded when adults would ask me the question, what do you want to do when you're older? I thought about the classics, maybe a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. But 5-year-old me didn't quite know, so instead I'd say, I want to change the world. And I meant it. But as I grew up, I realized that this childhood idealism of mine felt farther and farther away. We live in a world where young people are more aware than ever of the issues around us, and yet we're often left out of the decisions being made about them. A study by the UNICEF found that while an overwhelming majority of youths want more say in the decisions that affect their lives, 48% feel completely left out. Instead of being invited into these spaces, we're often dismissed as too young or not experienced enough to have a seat at the table. So slowly, we begin to internalize that feeling, and we hear a voice in our head that tells us, I am not experienced enough. I am not old enough. I am not ready. There's actually a name for this feeling. It's called imposter syndrome. That voice in our head that tells you that you're less capable, less intelligent, and less experienced than you really are. And the problem is that the longer we listen to it, the longer we wait. But here's what neuroscience actually tells us. We've been taught that motivation leads to action, that when you feel ready, then you can finally take action. But research actually shows that the opposite is true. We know that taking action stimulates the brain's dopamine system, which helps drive reward and motivation. What that means is that when you initiate a task, even in the smallest way, your brain releases dopamine, not because you finished something, but because you've begun. And psychologists call this the action motivation loop. In other words, you don't act because you're ready, you become ready because you act. So, here's the secret. Waiting until you're ready is a myth. Because if you're always waiting to feel ready before you begin, you're stuck in a trap. Because this very feeling of readiness that you're waiting for only comes after you take that first step. And this moment of realization came from me around 3 years ago when I decided to build an app for my grandpa who struggles with type 2 diabetes. Every Saturday night, I'd FaceTime him in Dalian, and the first thing that he'd always ask me without fail is, what did you have for dinner? At that time, it felt like a small moment of connection over a shared love for food, but over time I realized that while I tell him about new recipes I was trying with my mom, he'd always have the same 5 or so dishes. And so, I decided to build a sugar intake tracking app for him. And immediately the voices hit my head. You're not a software developer. You haven't even taken the right courses yet. You are not ready. And yet, despite not feeling quite ready, I decided to take that leap of faith. I began watching tutorials, teaching myself how to code, spending late nights debugging and trying things out. And now, I'm often amazed at all the changes in my life because of this one small decision. It's allowed me to discover my passion for computer science, and more importantly, realize that readiness is a habit that I could then apply to other parts of my life. So, here's my challenge for all of you in the audience. Think of one thing you've been putting off, not because you can't do it, but because you don't feel quite ready. It doesn't have to be big. Maybe it's an idea you've been too scared to start, a problem you've noticed but haven't acted on, or something that you care about but haven't taken that first step towards. And this week, I want you to do the smallest possible version of it. Take that first step and see what happens when you stop waiting. So, if you remember nothing else from today's talk, I want you to remember this. The world doesn't need you to be ready, it needs you to begin, because change doesn't happen when conditions are perfect, it happens when you do. So, stop waiting and start now. Thank you.